Hey there, we'll talk Matt Olson reaching 40 home runs, Week 21 sleepers, and two-star pitchers up next on a Kokomo Friday.
Alcantara, Soroka, you look so good in Boca. Peralta, Manoa, bounce back for Aaron Nola. Giolito, Castillo, Yoshida, Wilson,
Giancarlo and Votto. Value so high, but ADP so low. Frank Love's hit some kind of Joe. Now let's get on with the show.
Happy Kokomo Friday and welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on August 11th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by the Scotty Dubs, Scott White. Today on the show, Matt Olson has tied the league lead in home runs, 40 homers for Matt Olson. Matthew Liberatore was awesome in a revenge game against Tampa Bay, Week 21 sleepers, two-star pitchers, and much more. Before we get started, help us out by liking this video and subscribing on YouTube if you haven't already. And if you're listening on the audio side, download, follow, and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. Let's jump in.
Oh my goodness gracious!
Hey there, Scotty. How you doing? Oh my goodness gracious. Player of the night.
You had the better one. I gave you the breadstick, but I will take the second best choice, which is Reese Olson. Reese Olson had the best start of his career against the Twinkies today. 2 hits over 6 shutout innings, struck out 8, did walk 3, but the good stuff: 2 hits, no runs, 8 strikeouts, 14 swinging strikes on 94 pitches. It not only was it his best start, and by a pretty considerable margin, I'll say, it was his first start that was anything close to good in 5, I think it was. I wrote down 4, but I actually think it was 5. It had been a while. I'd basically dumped Reese Olson everywhere I had excitedly picked him up originally. And so I'm kind of encouraged by this, kind of not, because he was facing the Twins, and the Twins have by far the highest strikeout rate against right-handed pitchers. After this, it's probably up to like 28%. Which is ridiculous. I mean, just think about on an individual level that a strikeout rate approaching 30% is somebody who we're liable to dismiss on this podcast. So if the Twins, that's happening for their entire lineup against right-handed pitchers, it's a good reason to consider just about any righty against the Twins, particularly one with a modicum of strikeout potential like we've seen from Reese Olson. I'm probably not picking up Olson again. He just hasn't gone deep enough into starts, even when he has pitched well. And being a rookie, how likely is that to change? And pitching for the Tigers, what is it all going to add up to anyway? But it was nice to see him show that potential once again.
Yeah, look, the 14 swinging strikes, again, it's, you got to take it with a grain of salt going up against this Minnesota Twins team. And looking into his pitch mix, his slider, four-seam, and changeup have all performed quite well this year. His sinker has been awful. So Reese Olson, Detroit Tigers organization, if you're listening, just scrap it, man. Scrap the sinker. Let's go four-seam, slider, and changeup, because in terms of batting average against and whiff rates, those pitches have actually performed quite well.
I do think Olson's a pretty interesting dynasty asset. I just don't think there's a path for him to be relevant this year, given the way the Tigers have handled him and the current state of the Tigers. But yeah, that slider looks like a legit pitch. It is probably also worth noting he's lined up to face the Twins again next week. So maybe he'll do this again. I don't have him among my 10 sleeper pitchers for next week. He's worthy of considering as a streamer option. But again, I mean, you look at his track record for this year. This was only his second quality start. It was the only time he had gone. It was only his second time he'd gone 6 innings. The first time it was barely a quality start. He allowed 3 earned runs. There just hasn't been enough. There hasn't been enough good starts for me trust in Lightning striking twice, even with the favorable matchup against the Twins.
Yeah, I hear you there. And typically for a young pitcher facing the same offense 2 starts in a row, even if it's a good matchup, I get a little weary about a situation like that. They just saw him, so they kind of they know what to expect. So it's a great start here for Reese Olson, but it was a shorter slate, so not too many huge standouts here on Thursday. The other one was Matthew Liberatore, who had the best start of his career as well. The ultimate revenge game at the Tampa Bay Rays, if you remember way back in the day. I don't know, it's 3 years ago. It's really not that far. But he was traded for Randy Arozarena from Tampa Bay, going to the St. Louis Cardinals, and a great start. 8 shutout innings, 2 hits, 0 walks, a career high 7 strikeouts for Liberatore, 15 swinging strikes on 101 pitches. He had everything working. 4 swinging strikes on the fastball, 4 on the curve, 3 on the sinker, 3 on the slider, and velocity was up across the board here between 1 and 1.7 miles per hour on basically all of his pitches. And something I noticed in this start, he did change the pitch mix a little bit, faded the 4-seam fastball in the curve, and he threw more changeups and slider. Kind of went with this diverse pitch mix. Used 5 different pitches between 14% and 32%. So I almost wonder, in the same way that like a Josiah Gray has done it, or Mitch Keller dating back to last year, just throwing more pitches and kind of mixing it up. Maybe that's the route, the way to get the best out of Matthew Liberatore. Again, we're not adding him. We need to see a lot more after this start, but this was a guy that did have some prospect pedigree, and this was an amazing start. Scott, your thoughts on Liberatore dominating the Rays?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure what to make of it, since it is an isolated event. This was only the 3rd start he's made that could be considered anything in the vicinity of good, and clearly the best of them. If he can sustain this improved velocity on the curveball and slider and is able to feature them as prominently as he did in this one, then maybe there is a path forward for him. But right now it's an incident. It's not a trend yet. And so I'm not going to bet on it becoming a trend. Interestingly, when we did have some excitement for him when he first came up, it's because he was throwing his fastball much harder. And that's normalized since then. It lasted a couple outings and then pretty much returned to normal. His curveball velocity has remained up this whole time and was even better in this start. So it's just kind of interesting. Again, I'm not willing to bet much of anything on Liberatore at this point, but he may have showed what his path is to becoming a usable fantasy option.
It wouldn't surprise me if he puts together 2 good starts, because next week he's facing the Oakland A's. Again, I'm not trusting it. Maybe if you're playing an NL only league and you're super desperate, you have no one else, you could throw Matthew Liberatore out there. He's 12% rostered. Let's see what he does next week against the Oakland A's. And let's just stick with the rest of the waiver wire pitchers here. Scott, you mentioned Reese Olson, Liberatore, 2 other names that I noticed here. Dean Kramer. It's like we're on again, we're off again with Dean Kramer. Strong start up against the Houston Astros. Obviously a really tough matchup. 7 innings, 2 runs, 5 strikeouts for him. Not many swinging strikes, allowed a lot of hard contact. Velocity was down. I don't know that I'd take too much away from the start for Dean Kramer. And Noah Syndergaard has now had 2 solid starts in 3 outings with the Cleveland Guardians. He was facing Toronto. That's actually a throwback revenge game too. I don't know how much he cares about facing the Blue Jays, but once was a Blue Jays farmhand back in the day. 5 2/3 innings, 1 run, 5 strikeouts for Syndergaard. Did have 12 swinging strikes, and also completely changed the pitch mix in this one for Syndergaard. Scott, anything on Dean Kramer and Cindy?
I mean, Dean Kramer is the ultimate embodiment of the random number generator effect that we're seeing at starting pitcher. And it's led to like a 4.50 ERA overall. The expected numbers are even worse, frankly. But because he pitches for a good team and because the good starts are like this, they go 7 innings. It's hard to completely write him off, especially in points leagues. In roto leagues, you may not be able to stomach the ups and downs as much, particularly when it's going to result in a 4.50 ERA. But I do think Kramer has some utility in points leagues. I don't know exactly when to decide when to use him and not, since it is a random number generator. It's not, doesn't even seem that tied to matchups. He was facing Houston this time. 2 start weeks, maybe. I don't know, but there's some utility there, I would say. And Syndergaard, I'm not sold on him. It was a day of good pitching performances from pitchers that need to sell us a lot harder than this, basically.
It's so frustrating too, Scott, because for most of the year, Sandy Alcantara, Aaron Nola, guys we take in the second and third round, they've looked pretty bad, right, for the most part. And then we have guys like Dean Kramer, Noah Syndergaard, Liberatore. They go out here on Thursday and they put together these awesome starts in nobody's lineup. Like no one's starting them, right? So it's just like it's frustrating. Yeah. For Dean Kramer, I did want to look up the splits real quick. I'm pretty sure he's much better at home this year. No, I lied. He has a 5.09 ERA at home, a 3.70 ERA on the road. That's pretty big sample size for him too. He's at the Padres next week. They're 19th in WOBA against righties. I don't know. I guess if you're desperate and you're looking for a single start streamer, it might work, at least based on the home road splits this year for Dean Kramer. Not that I'm too excited about that. Scott, let's talk about Matt Olson, your boy, on the Atlanta Braves, 2 for 5 with his 40th home run, ties the league lead with Shohei Ohtani. I brought this up a few times. People are probably tired of hearing it. Before the season started, I bet on Matt Olson to lead baseball in home runs, Scott. So,
that's why you're bringing this up.
I bring it up a lot. I'm very excited right now. I think
how much money?
It's like a $20 bet to win $600. I'm kind of excited. So let's go, Matt Olson.
It's not life-changing money.
No, it's not life.
You're a low roller here.
Well, Scott, trying to move into a co-op, you need all the money you can get. It's a busy time.
I understand. I have a living room full of yard sale furniture.
The YouTube chat, by the way, they are relentless. They're
they are heckling my living room so hard today. It's
seriously,
it's a little distracting.
Yeah. Let's talk about Matt Olson, by the way. 40 home runs again. He's batting .267. The counting stats are insane. 87 runs scored, 101 RBI, 979 OPS. He was on pace. These were his pace numbers before this game. 57 homers, 126 runs scored, 147 RBI. The question I wanted to pose to you, Scott, is where do you see Matt Olson being valued next season? Look, we still have a lot of time left this year, but we're going to try and work in some analysis for next year, some dynasty content, just to keep everybody involved. What are your thoughts? Where do you think Matt Olson goes and drafts next season?
Well, gosh, there's no reason to believe the Braves lineup's going to get any worse. So, obviously he's proven to be one of the elite power hitters in the game. In fact, I saw a stat just last week. I assume it's still true the way Olson's been performing, but since he debuted, he leads all major leaguers in home runs, or since he hit his first home run, which I think was in his major league debut. So yeah, in 2017, during that span of time, Aaron Judge is second, at least at the time. At the time, somebody tweeted this out. I forget who it was, but it was a trustworthy source. So yeah, he's a legit power hitter. We've known that, of course. He has now set a career high in home runs. This is kind of what we were hoping for last year when the Braves acquired him, going from that big ballpark in Oakland to a more favorable park in Atlanta. And so, yeah, I know I said at the start of the second half that, he's at his hottest right now. Maybe we should be careful not to overvalue him while he's at his hottest. But it's been a struggle adjusting my rest of season rankings at first base all year, what to do with him and Vladimir Guerrero, who's been a perpetual underachiever, Pete Alonso, who's had some ups and downs related to that wrist injury, right? It was a wrist.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then Paul Goldschmidt, who's, I'm being careful not to bury because
he has slowed down quite a bit.
Right. Yeah. In fact, I think at this point, Jeimer Candelario is outscoring him for the year, or they're very close anyway. I've moved Matt Olson up to second. behind just Freddie Freeman, of course. And unless something dramatically changes here over the next 6 weeks, I imagine that's how I'll draft him next year. So what is the second first baseman worth? Where does he deserve to go? It's kind of a weak position. But, that is kind of a crowded tier because I won't tier him separately from Alonso and Guerrero and presumably Goldschmidt unless he just continues to spiral. So I'm thinking it'll be around the 2-3 turn. I don't think he'll slip all the way to round 4. That's what I'm thinking.
I think it'll be earlier than that.
I filibustered the heck out of that. So
yeah.
I hope you've been thinking about what you think.
I think if he gets to 50 home runs and what you mentioned, there's no reason to think that the Braves lineup will slow down next year. They have all these guys under contract, right? They're in the primes of their career. Matt Olson entering Thursday, the 4th overall player in Roto, the 5th best hitter in head-to-head points leagues. It's kind of it's a dangerous game buying a player coming off of a career year. We talk about that a lot. It's like, okay, why don't you just buy the dip on Pete Alonso next year if he winds up in like the 3rd or 4th round, and instead of taking Matt Olson in the 2nd round? That'll be a conversation that we'll have. But in terms of 50 home runs and these kind of counting stats, it's really, really impressive stuff. So I think he's going to wind up being a 2nd round pick, but yeah, I'll be wrong. We'll see.
That's basically what I said. He'll be drafted next year, kind of like Pete Alonso was drafted this year.
I think that makes sense. All right, Matt Olson, you've been awesome. Continue to hit home runs because we want to make some money. Let's talk about some waiver wire hitters here. And again, not too many names to talk about, but Yainer Diaz, 2 for 5 with his 15th home run. He's batting .275 with an .815 OPS. He has started 7 of a possible 14 games since Yordan Alvarez has returned. Diaz has appeared in 11 of them. He's 40% rostered. Is this playing time enough, Scott, to make Yainer Diaz an ad in 1 catcher leagues? Started in 7 of 14 games since Alvarez has returned.
And this was only his 2nd start in 5 games.
Yeah.
So I'm going to lean no on this.
Feels like whenever he plays, he hits a home run.
I mean, if you play in a 15-team 2-catcher league, he probably deserves to be rostered.
Sure.
But I think even like 2-catcher 12-team league, it's kind of borderline. I think yes?
Yeah, I think rock solid. Top 20 guy.
Okay.
The question comes down to, again, if you're streaming the back half of the top 12 catchers, right? If you play in a 1-catcher 12-team league, the back half is a little sketchy there, 11th and 12th. Mm-hmm. We talked about MJ Melendez yesterday. He's been hot in the second half. Like, who would you rather have, MJ Melendez or Yainer Diaz?
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, that's fair, but you also have Mitch Garver, who's been useful of late, although it sounds like Jonah Heim's coming back next week. He won't be able to play as much as he was prior to the torn tendon sheath in his wrist because it sounds like he's only going to bat left-handed, and who knows how well that's going to go. So I do think Mitch Garver's in the mix now. Danny Jansen has proven his worth again recently. I know he left after a hit by pitch in this game, but no fractures, so he's okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess Yainer Diaz deserves to be mentioned within that group, and MJ Melendez is in the same vicinity too. It's a lot of catchers who are just kind of interesting, but you wouldn't really go near them in a 1-catcher league because of playing time concerns mostly.
Mm-hmm. I did want to look up Martin Maldonado's contract status for next year to see if he's on the team, because if not,
it's got to be retiring soon, right?
Yeah, he is 36 years old. It looks like there's a vested option. That was for this year. Unrestricted free agent. So if you have Yainer Diaz in a keeper or dynasty league, that could turn out to be an amazing play for next year, because if he's just the starting catcher, maybe he gets some games in a DH. They move Yordan Alvarez to the outfield at times. That bat looks like it's absolutely going to play. So I'm more excited from, I guess, a long-term perspective for Yainer Diaz. But, man, he's been really, really good.
I mean, his minor league numbers were excellent, too.
Yeah.
His defensive metrics, pretty terrible. And I presume that's why Martin Maldonado is getting preferential treatment there behind the plate. I don't know how much Dusty Baker's influence has to do with that. I guess we'll see. Depending how they handle Martin Maldonado in the offseason. If they bring him back, I don't imagine there's going to be much competition for his services. Then that means the whole organization philosophically values defense behind the plate more than Yainer Diaz can provide. And that might be the sort of thing that keeps him from ever living up to his full potential in fantasy. But as a hitter, yeah, I mean, he looks, I don't know, maybe his career goes the Mike Napoli route where he's a first backup at catcher early on, and then eventually transitions to another position. I don't know. He's 24 years old. I'm not going to write his whole career today, but there is a defensive shortcoming that might get in Diaz's way.
According to StatCast, Yainer Diaz 5th percentile in framing, 92nd percentile in terms of pop time. So seems like he has a good arm, but in terms of framing,
and that's more important in today's game than it used to be with all the base running rules.
Yeah,
but the framing's pretty awful.
No, I think it's a good point because on a team where they are loaded with offense, I don't know how much more they need, right? Maybe they do value that defensive catcher behind the plate more. So it is a good point there on Yainer Diaz. I was thinking maybe first base, but they signed Jose Abreu to like a 3-year deal, right? He's not going anywhere, and they're not going to be able to trade that contract either. So I don't know. Interesting conversation with Yainer Diaz. The other name here, Scott, Brian Rocchio. This is a deeper league play, much deeper. 2 for 4 with 2 doubles and 2 RBI. He led off for the Guardians on Thursday. Does have some prospect pedigree. Didn't do too much in the minors this year, but was much better last year. Has flashed some power and speed. He's 9% rostered. We're talking 15-team Roto League scout with a middle infield spot. Any interest here on Brian Rocchio?
He shows up really high on the prospect rankings still, but the numbers just haven't been there in the minors, and there isn't a lot in the underlying metrics to suggest latent or dormant or latent. Yeah, I guess latent's the better word. Latent potential. Yeah, I'm skeptical.
Okay.
But it's nice to see him batting leadoff, and does he rate high because of his defense? Well, they're playing him at third base, not shortstop. So how much confidence do they have in his defense, really? I don't know. Just not enough power. He homered 3 times the entire year at AAA. And he did have 18 between 2 levels last year. But again, like the exit velocity readings, all of that stuff, not great.
He started at third base on Thursday, but typically Jose Ramirez plays there. They moved Ramirez to DH for this game. So I think more often than not, Rocchio will play shortstop. Maybe.
Yeah, he has, I guess. Maybe the 2 times I looked were the 2 starts he made at third base. Or I guess this was the 3rd start he's made at third base, 4 starts at shortstop. So he's been bouncing between the 2. He
does have third base eligibility on CBS. So I don't know. Maybe he's been playing there more than I actually realized. Jorge Polanco, Scott, a name we haven't talked about since he's returned. He has played 13 games. He's batting only 182 with 1 home run and a 639 OPS. Still a pretty small sample size. I guess there's a chance that he does get going at some point here, but Royce Lewis is on a rehab assignment. Sounds like he could be back soon. Is it time to drop Jorge Polanco, Scott?
I think so. In the average fantasy league, obviously a league of more depth, you'll want to be more patient because there aren't great alternatives among hitters, among anything really. But in the average fantasy league, I think playing time is going to be an issue. And between all the injuries, he hasn't shown much at the plate all year.
Yeah. Would you drop Jorge Polanco for Orlando Arcia, who we spoke about the other day?
If I needed to start somebody now, yeah.
What about Zach Geloff? Hit another home run on Wednesday? Yeah, Wednesday.
I don't know. I'm not feeling Geloff. I'm not. I know he has a decent home run and stolen base total for the short time he's been in the majors so far, and he's playing every day, but high strikeout rate, low exit velocity, that's a bad combination. Particularly bad lineup, big ballpark. I'd rather start him than Polanco right now, I guess, but in the long run, I'm not willing to bet he'll be better than Polanco.
Scott, I invite you to recheck those exit velocity numbers on Zach Geloff. He is up to a 92.2 average exit velocity with a 14% barrel rate, which is pretty awesome.
But what's the max?
107.6.
That's a bad max exit velocity, and that's a better indicator of power potential than average exit velocity.
That's true, but it's a small sample size. I don't know. I really like what I've seen from Geloff. If you play in a shallow league and, again, you want to ride the hot hand and get rid of Polanco, dump him, I have no problem dropping him for a name like Zach Geloff the way he's playing right now. Let's take our first break. When we return, we'll talk about a few struggling pitchers, Hunter Brown, Bryce Elder. We'll talk about those names right after this.
Wake up to football highlights and news from around the world with the one and only Morning Footy team.
Rise and shine, football fans. Welcome to Morning Footy.
Start your all-day football craze with Morning Footy, part of the all-new Golazo Network.
Welcome back. A quick reminder to follow us on TikTok if you haven't already. TikTok.com/@FBTPod, or just hop on TikTok and search up FBT Pod and make sure to follow us. We throw up some shorter clips with some highlights covering them, talking about big plays. The other day I made one, Kyle Tucker facing Felix Bautista, players of the night, latest news, all that kind of fun stuff. Follow us on TikTok @FBT Pod. And Scott, got to give a shout out once again. RotoWare, they did it. They did it again. They recreated the original Die Hard movie poster with Matt McClane's face on it. Check this out.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing. And on the top, it says Yippee-ki-yay. I had to do it. I saw it. I was like, got to get it. Awesome shirt.
You buy more sports apparel than anyone I've ever known in my life.
That's true. That is a truth.
Like, how often do you rewear anything?
I don't know. On this podcast, it's like I only wear baseball shirts pretty much. I was looking through my wardrobe today. It's a lot of baseball shirts. It's player shirts, random names. It's these RotoWare shirts. I don't know. It's become my whole wardrobe basically, but it's awesome stuff. So make sure to go check it out. RotoWare.com. What do we do with these struggling pitchers? Hunter Brown he has struggled for some time now. He was at the Orioles, which typically it's good ballpark to pitch in, but a very tough lineup to face right now. 6 innings, 5 runs allowed, 7 strikeouts, 12 swinging strikes on 97 pitches, but has been the case all season. A lot of hard contact allowed in this one. 10 hard hits allowed for Hunter Brown. Did not have his curveball working in this one, which has been his best pitch all season. So you take that away, I think it's pretty obvious he was going to struggle here. And he did turn in 3 quality starts before this. But if you look at his last 9 starts overall, 5.63 ERA, a 144 whip, still over a strikeout per inning. He's 94% rostered. Scott, what are we doing with Hunter Brown? Are you still starting him at the Marlins next week?
I might. It's a good matchup. Not as good of a matchup as it used to be. It really just depends what else I have. I mean, Hunter Brown's not an automatic start at this point. He's not an automatic sit at this point.
He is a hold, though. You're not dropping him.
No, I mean, there have been enough good starts. And, even though the strikeouts have been down recently, he's a good ground ball pitcher. So that's something he can get away with. Him being a rookie, you're probably thinking, at this point in the season, are the innings beginning to pile up for Hunter Brown? But back when I wrote that article, which, I don't know, was it 3 weeks ago? 15 pitchers who looked like we're going to have innings issues soon. Hunter Brown was among them, but he was the lowest level of concern for me. He is at, let's see, he had 126 and a third last year. A little bit more if you count the playoffs. And he's still 15 innings away from that. And of course, he's going to be able to go well beyond what he did last year before they worry about limiting his innings. Will it affect his performance once he gets past that previous high? I guess that's possible, but I think he's okay as long as you don't treat him as more than like a matchups play.
Mm-hmm. Again, that is Hunter Brown at the Marlins next week. It's a big ballpark. I think I'd be all right starting him there, but I think he's closer to the back end of my top 50 now compared to, for a lot of the year, he was inside of my top 40, top 35. So he has fallen down the rankings a little bit. That is Hunter Brown. Let's talk about Bryce Elder, who allowed 5 runs over 5 innings pitched against the Pirates, who they have been pretty pesky in this series against the Atlanta Braves. He gave up 8 hard hits in this game. Really leaned into his sinker for some reason, 53% usage. His slider and his changeup, again, look, there's more that goes into pitching than just me looking at the results and saying, oh, your slider and your changeup are good, you should throw those pitches more. I understand there's a whole lot of what am I feeling that day and sequencing and all that kind of stuff. But it just kind of feels like Bryce Elder should be using his secondary pitches more because they've been much better than his sinker at this point this season. Over his last 12 starts, I'm looking at, Scott, he's allowed 4 or more runs in 6 of those. He's got a 5.37 ERA, a 1.33 whip during that time. He's still 93% rostered. Same question. Are we holding? Are we starting next week at home against the Yankees?
And it's a pretty good matchup, but I don't think I'd be willing to start Bryce Elder. He's droppable, I suppose, if that's your way of getting Cole Reagans or Chase Silseth or Gavin Williams, who's still available in a decent number of leagues. More available than Bryce Elder anyway. I'd take any of them over Elder at this point.
Would you do it for Emerson Hancock?
No, because I kind of think Emerson Hancock's going to be Elder-like. Maybe with more strikeouts, but I don't think he's going to be a big source of strikeouts. And really, I think with Elder, it may be as simple as he's just not commanding his pitches well enough right now. He's putting himself in bad counts and struggling to put hitters away as a result. So I broke it down a little differently. You gave the numbers from his last 12 starts. I looked at his first 15 starts versus his last 8. First 15 starts, 64% strike rate. Last 8, 61% strike rate. Neither of those is good, particularly good, but 61 is more like bad than 64% is. While he was getting 64% strikes, 7.5 K per 9. While he was getting 61% strikes, 4.8 K per 9. So I think it may not be like the roof caving in here so much as just he's not sharp right now, and it's having kind of a snowball effect for him. Some regression was due, no doubt, when it was only a few starts ago, he had an ERA in the mid 2s still. Now it's verging, what is it now? 364? 364, yeah. It's going from 245 to 364 in his past 6 starts. But I do think there's still a pretty good pitcher here, and a pretty good pitcher on a great offensive team can become a very valuable pitcher in fantasy. So I don't think he's a dump across the board. But again, if you can get one of the really exciting up-and-comers that we've seen in recent weeks, Reagans, Silseth, etc., then I'd be fine with that.
I don't think we need to have as long of a conversation for this next player, but I think we're done with Alek Manoah, right? At the Guardians, 4 runs over 4 innings, 3 more walks for him. And in 6 starts since returning to the Blue Jays, a 4.91 ERA, a 1.43 whip, still 79% rostered at the Reds next week. Alek Manoah, your thoughts?
I mean, his previous start was decent. I'll give him that. But yeah, I don't know what it's going to take at this point. It was decent, but sorry, I'm kind of in my own head here. All right, so exactly what happened to Alek Manoah in his last start: 3 earned runs in 6 2/3 innings, 5 strikeouts, just 2 walks. I mean, it's a quality start. If that's the best Alek Manoah is going to do, it's not worth keeping him around. And I don't know what it's going to take. As bad as his bad starts have been, I don't know what it's going to take for me to trust having him in my lineup again. So I just think it's too late in the year for him to like, with the idea that, you know, there's this big upside you're going to miss out on if you drop him. I think it's too late in the year for you to realistically to cash that in, even if it happens, even if it does come true and he figures it out and he's back. And yeah, I just think it's probably not worth it.
To put it in perspective, Alek Manoah was dropped in my most important league, NFBC main event, 15-team Roto League, very deep rosters, obviously. He's dropped. He's still 98% rostered in that format, but at least in the league that I play in, the 2% of leagues, he was dropped in a league that deep. So, and you know, these are pretty smart people playing. So, yeah, I think Alek Manoah can go. It's like you said, just too late in the season. Some impressive veteran pitching performances here, Scott. I've got a group of 4 names that pitched on Thursday. Kenta Maeda, a tough luck loss at the Tigers. 6 innings, 1 run allowed with 4 strikeouts in this one. Velocity was up across the board. He has a 2.36 ERA, a .95 whip in 9 starts since returning to the Twins. Aaron Nola was solid against the Nationals. 5 innings, 1 run, 6 strikeouts there. James Paxton, also solid against the Royals, 5 1/3 shutout, 6 strikeouts. Noticed his velocity was down pretty substantially. It was kind of raining off and on in that start, so I'm like, maybe you give James Paxton the benefit of the doubt, but definitely something to watch for his next start as well. Clayton Kershaw did make his return to the Dodgers. He was facing the Rockies, 5 innings, 1 run, 4 strikeouts, only got up to 67 pitches. It looks like they're kind of playing it safe with Kershaw for now. Any thoughts here, Scott? Kershaw, Paxton, Nola, and Kenta Maeda.
So, yeah, I mean, I noticed the velocity being down for Paxton, too. I'm going to go back to the line I said earlier, where right now it's an incident. It's not a trend. I did go through the game log for Paxton. He's had starts sprinkled in this year where the average fastball velocity was like low 94. And in this one, it was the lowest of the year, 93.7. But it's in that same range, and then he bounced back with like 96 in his next start. So there's been a bit of fluctuation there for him throughout the year. No reason to panic, I would say, over James Paxton, but given his injury history, something to keep an eye on. And as for the others, you know, I still think Nola is somebody to stick with through thick and thin. And so that's what I'm going to do. If I have him, that's what I'm doing with him. And starts like this are encouraging. Obviously, he went only 5 innings. That's uncharacteristic for Nola, but the actual performance was good. He's been getting a lot of whiffs with the curveball lately. I mean, yeah, I think he's been. It's a little harder to say in Roto leagues because I know the ERA is high, but in points leagues, I mean, he's among the top scoring pitchers still because of that volume he gives. So it's a little easier to justify sticking with him through thick and thin in a points league for Nola. And then for Maeda, I'll just give the updated stat line that I'm always referring to. If you eliminate the 10-run outing before he landed on the IL with a triceps injury, Kenta Maeda has a 2.73 ERA, .96 whip, 10.6 K per 9 this year.
All right. On Aaron Nola, by the way, there's not much that you could do with this at this point in the season. There's not much that's actionable, but I was updating the rankings the other day. I moved him down a little bit. SP22, I lowered him behind, you know, those names that we've been expecting to do, I guess, do more this season, like the Pablo Lopez's and the Logan Gilberts. George Kirby's been rock solid. Blake Snell, we know he's been on a run for quite some time. Jesus Luzardo, I think I mentioned recently, he's like a top 15 SP in both points leagues and Roto leagues. So I moved Nola behind those names, but I did just look it up. He's entering today. He was 20th in points leagues, Aaron Nola, the 20th starting pitcher. So after this start, it'll probably get him up around 15. So I hear what you're saying.
You're under-ranking him, Frank. I'm just kidding. It's obviously rest of season rankings, not what they've done up to this point. Otherwise, they'd be very easy to put together.
Yeah.
I am curious in seeing what he is in Roto. And it might be higher than you think. It's going to take a minute to count it. Gosh, he's behind you, say Kikuchi. I would definitely rather have Aaron Nola than you say Kikuchi. Okay. Let me put it into my spreadsheet here, and that'll help me count faster. 32nd in Roto.
Yeah. That is a
among
big
starting
disparity
pitchers.
between points leagues and Roto. Wow.
Yeah, but 32nd's still good.
It's good, but
Not what you drafted Aaron Nola to be. Don't get me
yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
but
You
it's
know, you're
not
drafted
like-
as like a top 12 starting pitcher.
Yeah.
So it's, I guess, a pretty big
it's
letdown.
just in the conversation of start him or sit him.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, if you have ERA issues, maybe you sit him, but otherwise, you'll probably want to stick with him.
All right, let's talk about some news and notes. Bichette has been hitting in the batting cage and jogging, but is not yet running at full speed. He's missed all of August with right patellar tendonitis. Bryce Harper was removed Thursday due to back spasms. Joe Musgrove is expected to begin playing catch around August 24th. He's entering the second of a 3-week shutdown period following his August 4th placement on the IL due to right shoulder inflammation. Chris Sale will be limited to about 4 innings in his return to the rotation. Friday, he threw 54 pitches in his last rehab outing. He's facing the Tigers on Friday. Scott, would you start Sale in a daily lineup league?
Yeah, I would. The matchup makes it easier, but he got a bunch of strikeouts on his rehab assignment. Feeling pretty confident.
All right. Late season surge here from Chris Sale. Carlos Rodon threw from flat ground on Wednesday. The indication is that Rodon could need just a minimum stay on the IL, which would put him in line to return for a home series against the Nationals that begins on August 22nd. But honestly, I don't know if we will start Carlos Rodon when he returns because he was quite bad. Justin Turner is dealing with a left heel bone bruise that typically requires 4 to 6 weeks of downtime, but he plans to play through the injury. I would not be surprised one bit if the production starts to fade because of this injury for Justin Turner. So just something to keep in mind. Walker Buehler touched 93 miles per hour during a 1-inning simulated game on Wednesday, typically averages 95 miles per hour. He also acknowledged his original goal of returning on September 1st is not realistic, but should return at some point down the stretch.
I mean, I guess I feel less confident seeing this report than I did, what was it, a week ago when Dave Roberts was saying, he's on the verge of a rehab assignment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's still 2 miles per hour below what he normally is. How much rehabbing does he have ahead of him still? I think a decent amount. And also, I think the report said it wasn't clear what role he'd have when he did return. So I'm not confident he's going to have enough time to stretch out. And so, unless you just have a spare IL spot, I wouldn't be putting too much stock in Buehler this year.
I'm not too worried about the velocity because I feel like even when we see guys start up in spring training, there's always a few names that they're down 2 miles per hour. And then by the time the season starts, they usually get built up. So I think it should be all right. But in terms of how much is he going to help fantasy teams this year, it's probably not much.
Yeah. And I don't think the velocity being where it is now is necessarily an indication of he'll never get it back. I was just speaking to it from the perspective of, well, he still has a ways to go.
Yeah.
If it's not up to 95 yet. Although it is also worth noting, this is Walker Buehler's second Tommy John surgery, and that returning from a second Tommy John surgery isn't nearly as reliable as returning from a first. So I think it's widely assumed he's just going to be back to ace level next year. I'd be careful with that. Maybe he will, but it's not the same as the first Tommy John surgery.
Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, when he's at his best, he's drafted as a top 10 starting pitcher for fantasy. And he'll probably be a top 25 guy, probably like a SP2, SP3, something like that, I think.
If he is, I don't think I'm going to draft much of him. I'm sure I'll have him in my top 40. I feel pretty confident in that.
Right.
I guess it kind of depends too of what we do see from him down the stretch.
Sure. Interesting conversation on Walker Buehler. O'Neal Cruz has begun a formal running program. He's also been throwing and taking light fielding practice the last couple of weeks. If Cruz's surgically repaired ankle responds well to the running progression, he could head out on a rehab assignment within the next few weeks. I'm thinking we see O'Neal Cruz in September. He's up to 79% rostered. Jose Abreu was out of the lineup Thursday because of lower back discomfort. Chas McCormick was also out with a bruised left knee. Brendan Rodgers has missed 3 straight with discomfort in his right hamstring. Garrett Whitlock is on track to return from the IL on Sunday, expected to serve as a multi-inning reliever for the Red Sox. Danny Jansen left after getting hit by a pitch on his right hand. X-rays came back negative. And Randy Vasquez is expected to start for the Yankees Friday against the Marlins. And speaking of Yankee farmhands, Scott, good old Davy Garcia was claimed by the Chicago White Sox. Former top prospect Davy Garcia has a 5.77 ERA down in the minors since the start of 2019. It's been a rough go. We'll see. Maybe he can revive his career with the White Sox.
I haven't thought about Davy Garcia in a long time, so I think
same.
That might be tougher for a Yankees fan than anybody else.
You're throwing the old Yankee fan label on me, huh, Scott?
The label fits.
Yeah, I'm assuming most fantasy podcasts are probably not going to bring up Davy Garcia at this point. So that's fair. That is fair. Let's take our final break, and when we return, we will talk Week 21 preview here on Fantasy Baseball Today.
It's time for the best Transformers yet.
There you go.
Is now streaming on Paramount Plus.
This is gonna be fun, man.
Now that's top tier manifestation.
Transformers: Rise of the Beasts. Rated PG-13. Now streaming on Paramount Plus.
Welcome back, and let's preview Week 21, the schedule for next week. 6 teams with 7 games. That includes the D-backs, the Mets, Cardinals, Royals, Padres, and Mariners. 18 teams with 6 games next week, and 6 teams with 5 games. The Guardians, White Sox, Cubs, Phillies, Blue Jays, and the Twins. Starters sit these fringy 2-star pitchers. First up, I've got Bobby Miller, who's facing the Brewers and the Marlins. Pretty good matchups, but over his last 9 starts, a 5.44 ERA and a 1.45 WHIP. Scott, your thoughts on Bobby Miller?
So it's worth pointing out I'm grading all the 2-star pitchers on a curve this week because there are only 27 of them by my count. So many teams have only 5 games. Most of your lineup is going to be 1-star pitchers. Of the 27 2-star pitchers, there are only 12 that I'm willing to recommend on any level. Bobby Miller is among them, and I actually have him in the tier ahead of just the points leagues only option. So I might consider Bobby Miller even in a categories league because the matchups are so good and because he's coming off one of his better starts. Obviously, I might not do that in a normal week for 2-star pitchers, but be a little more willing to roll the dice this week.
Next up, we have Braxton Garrett facing the Astros and at the Dodgers.
I actually don't like that so much. He's in the no thanks tier for me.
Yeah, I mean, he's pitched okay, but those matchups are really, really tough for Braxton Garrett. Logan T. Allen at the Reds and facing the Tigers.
Don't like that so much either.
Yeah, he's kind of the opposite because he hasn't pitched very well. He's been very inefficient, but those matchups are pretty good. The Reds are not playing too well right now. So
in Cincinnati?
Yeah, maybe it's a points league for me, but Scott says he's out. Wade Miley has pitched well this year, but again, tough matchups at the Dodgers, at the Rangers.
Right. No thanks.
No thanks, and I assume that will be the case for one Brady Singer facing the Mariners and at the Cubs.
Would it be me?
All right, let's talk 2-star pitchers to add and stream. You've got 4 names on the list. Who are they?
I do. Actually, is it 5? It's 5, isn't it?
I have 4, unless I copied the wrong list.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, you're right. My bad.
All good.
Yeah, I bumped one at the last. Okay, so I sent you an original list and then I changed it. Okay. Only 4. The 5th, if you must know, is Emerson Hancock at Kansas City at Houston. So if you need more than 10 sleeper pitchers, Emerson Hancock is another one to consider. But here are the ones I like more than Emerson Hancock. Nick Pivetta at Washington at the Yankees. Those are 2 good matchups. And I can't say for sure he will be the starter in both of those games because Sometimes they like to use an opener in front of Nick Pivetta. But 2 of his last 3 outings have been legitimate starts, and he looked good in both of them. And obviously, he's been getting a ton of strikeouts for a couple months now. So Nick Pivetta, I think, is a pretty good choice. Miles Michaelis, another random number generator. We were talking about D. Kramer earlier. Michaelis certainly fits the bill as well, though he does have more. That random number generator has churned out more good starts than bad since about mid-May. His last 18 starts, Miles Michaelis has a 3.63 ERA. His matchups this week are Oakland and the Mets, who have become a pretty good matchup themselves. Kyle Hendricks. So we got a big group of 1-star pitchers I like more than Kyle Hendricks. But in between Mike among 2-start options, Hendricks is facing the White Sox, is facing the Royals. 2 pretty good matchups. Kind of a random number generator himself. Not a lot of strikeouts even when he pitches well. That's more of a points league recommendation, I would say. And then I have to mention Graham Ashcraft. I don't like it. Don't like it one bit. I feel like the run he's been on is just as much of a fake out as the run he was on back in April, and things crashed. Gosh, I can't speak. Things crashed pretty hard thereafter. But he did have 18 whiffs Wednesday against Miami. I don't know where it came from. I don't know if he can do it again. I know his pitch mix was a little different. He threw his sinker more. I think that helped the cutter to play up because maybe those two played off each other well, sinker cutter. But we've seen other starts where Ashcraft used his sinker more and didn't get nearly 18 whiffs. So very skeptical of him overall still, but he does have a 1.94 ERA in his last 8 starts, amazingly. And this week, he is in line to face the Guardians, which is a great matchup, the Blue Jays, which is a not so bad matchup, actually.
All right. Well, if it's a light week for 2-star pitchers, Scott, we might be scrambling to find some single-star streamers, and you've got 6 names on the list here. Who are they?
Gavin Williams against the Tigers, coming off a breakout start with 12 strikeouts, 1 hit. He does have another start over the weekend at Tampa Bay, I think it is.
Yep.
But if he comes through there, then that makes this start against the Tigers, recommendation against the Tigers, even easier to justify. All right. So the other 2 big breakout pitchers from the past couple weeks have tough matchups, actually. Cole Reagans is going against the Cubs in Chicago, and Chase Silseth is facing the Rays. Both of them also have starts coming up this weekend that may sober me up on them. But right now I am very high on both Cole Reagans and Chase Silseth. High enough that if they do look good this weekend still, I'm willing to trust them with those not so great matchups, given the strikeout potential that they've shown recently. And in Reagan's case, the Cubs lineup is middle of the road against left-handers. It's become a top 5 offense overall in terms of runs scored because they had a couple like huge games in Cincinnati, so it moved them way up there in the rankings. But against left-handers, still middle of the road. So I think Chase Silseth, especially at the Cubs, is a fine play. Steven Matz has been hot. He gets the Mets. Andrew Heaney's looked better. He gets the Brewers. Both of those great matchups. JP France back in the rotation. Astros going 6-man for a while. He gets the Mariners, which is a pretty good matchup. And that'll do it for sleeper pitchers.
All right, let's slide over to the hitters. Best hitter matchups for next week. The D-backs, the Mets, Cardinals, Rockies, and Mariners. The worst hitter matchups, Angels, Yankees, Rangers, Marlins, and the Nationals. With that being said, Scott, your 10 sleeper hitters for week 21.
So the Rockies are on there because they have a full week of home games. We haven't seen that a lot this year, but it's true this week. The Diamondbacks are number 1. As you point out, they're one of the teams the Rockies are facing in Colorado, so they get the Coors Field effect in 3 of their 7 games. So with that in mind, Nolan Jones is my absolute favorite sleeper hitter this week. And really, it's a distant number 1. I don't love this sleeper hitter slate. So if you're going to pick up anybody and start him off the waiver wire, Nolan Jones is by far the one I feel best about, with nothing but righties on the schedule, nothing but home games on the schedule. And he's been picking it back up at the plate recently. Among the Diamondbacks, I think you could consider Jake McCarthy. He doesn't play quite every day, but steals a lot of bases. Has been batting close to 300 since returning from the minors, and has that series in Colorado. Like I said, also Tommy Pham, who has been pretty much their primary DH since they acquired him from the Mets. Hasn't gotten going really with the Diamondbacks, but again, really good matchups, including a series at Colorado. Because there are so many teams playing 5 games this week, I wasn't willing to discriminate against hitters playing 5 games as much. And specifically the Twins, all 5 of their games as of now are expected to be against right-handed pitchers. That's good news for Max Kepler. It's really good news for Edward Julian, and it's good news for Matt Wallner too. I think they're all fine plays. All righties, like I said, and the teams they're facing are the Tigers and Pirates. So bad pitchers. Hopefully they can beat up on them. Tyler O'Neill was back in the lineup after missing some time with an injury. And the Cardinals, as you pointed out, have the 3rd best hitter matchups. Also, I like Kerry Carpenter this week, with the Tigers having just one lefty on the schedule. He has been playing every day, by the way. He started to play lefties and righties, but you'd still rather him face righties. And, not bad matchups. He's been hitting the ball well recently.
If you are deciding where to play Shohei Ohtani next week, as we've said for the entirety of the season, comes down to what you need, pitching versus hitting. But I will point out, as a pitcher, he's been dealing with cramping his last 3 starts. He's either been checked by the medical staff or he's left early. It seems like each of those past 3 starts. So keep that in mind. Ohtani is at the Rangers next week as a pitcher, and his 6 games as a hitter, he's facing Scherzer, Jordan Montgomery, John Gray, TBD, Zach Eflin, and Zach Littell. I think the lean for now is obviously to use Shohei Ohtani as a hitter. Speaking
Frank,
of, yes.
I hate to point this out. They're going after your room now.
What
But they're going after your room and referring to you as me. I'm getting blamed for both rooms that we're broadcasting from now, which is not right.
What are they saying about my room?
It
It's
looks
blue?
like a childhood aesthetic. Got a fat head on the wall.
Yeah, it's true.
You got the baby blue paint.
That's factual.
I'm piling on. We both
This,
suck.
by the way, if everyone's ever wondered what this is, this poster that I'm pointing to, that is John Starks. That's a signed John Starks photo of him dunking over Michael Jordan. So, I got to keep it as New York as possible in the background here.
Yeah.
So that's what we're working with.
Starks autograph, baby.
Funny story about that. Actually, we went to this video game bar for one of my birthdays. We didn't even know what it was. We just kind of stumbled across it. We saw them cut the tape open and everything. Their first day open. Turns out John Starks was going to be there signing pictures of him dunking over Jordan. It was amazing. I was so happy. It was one of the coolest birthdays ever. It's just so random and awesome. Let's wrap up with some leftovers here, Scott. Some hitting performances worth mentioning. Jose Altuve, 4 for 5 with his 9th home run, pushes him to a 12-game hitting streak. And since returning, he's batting .396 with 3 homers and 6 steals. He is awesome. Ryan Mountcastle also crushing it since returning. 24 games since returning from the IL, .408 batting average with 4 home runs for him. Riley Green went 2 for 4 with a bomb. 110.3 exit velocity, 453 feet. That's basically the only way it's going to leave Comerica Park, but a huge home run there for Riley Green. CJ Abrams, an update here, Scott. 2 for 5 with his 28th steal. 29 games since being moved up to the leadoff spot. He's batting .319 with 4 homers, 23 runs scored, and 17 steals. 150 game pace, 20 homers, 118 runs, 87 steals. CJ Abrams.
Yeah, I mean, he's been great. And in a way, it's not surprising because obviously he was a huge prospect from the time he was drafted, made it to the major leagues at a very young age last year after, looking good throughout his minor league career. I don't see a lot in the data that's changed during this hot stretch. I think a lot of it is just he's actually taking advantage of his speed now. I mean, that's huge. He has plenty of speed. He needs to put it to use. That was always going to have to be part of his game if he was going to be a major fantasy asset. And he is doing that now, which is the biggest thing. How legit is the hitting? I mean, he's thought to have a good hit tool. It's not like the line drive rate is incredible or the strikeout rate is especially low. I don't know what to make of that, but as many disappointments as there have been at shortstop this year, Willie Adames, Carlos Correa, etc. I mean, CJ Abrams is pretty close to must start in most leagues now, I would say, except the ones that use the tiniest lineups.
I know how to explain it, Scott. I actually found a new stat, one that I am coining right now here on the podcast. Are you ready?
All right. No, I'd love to hear it.
Yes, and this is for young players. I spoke about this yesterday with Zach Geloff. New stat that I just came up with. Expected confidence. Expected confidence. That is the new stat that I've come up with for young players. CJ Abrams moved up to the leadoff spot. He was given confidence, and he has just literally run with it. Obviously, there's no way to quantify that, Scott, but I think it makes sense if you're just, I don't know, talking about it from like a psychological perspective. I spoke about Zach Geloff yesterday. I was watching the A's game. He stepped up to the plate. He was oozing confidence. He looked like he was supposed to be there. He went up there. He just hit a home run. I was like, this dude has it right now. He's just playing with a lot of confidence. So that's my new stat, expected confidence. So take that for what it's worth. Trey Turner.
Why not?
Trey Turner, 1 for 4 with his 12th home run. We are grasping at straws here, but on his current homestand, 7 games, Trey Turner is batting .370 with 2 homers, 8 RBI, and a stolen base. Let's see where it goes. Randy Arozarena, we haven't talked about him in a while, Scott. He did go 1 for 3 with 2 steals here on Thursday, but since the start of July, 31 games, he is batting .175 he does have 3 homers and 5 steals, so that helps. The ground ball rate has jumped back up. It's 49% during that time. He's still hitting the ball hard. 91 mile per hour average exit velocity during that time. It kind of feels like he's been really unlucky. I'm sure he has scuffled a little bit as well, but I don't know. Your thoughts on Randy Arozarena?
Yeah, he's been bad for a long time now. And, we had kind of gotten past the point where we're like, oh, his expected stats look so bad, but he always outperforms them. So I guess we don't need to care about them. And then he has a stretch like this where he's batting. Did you give the numbers already? Last 35 games, 171.
I gave since the start of July, but it's similar.
I mean, what are you going to do? I think you're just going to keep starting him, but it is frustrating, and it does call into question. It does call everything into question again regarding what caliber of player he is for fantasy.
Mm-hmm. Man, the overall batting average down to 256. It's pretty bad.
And he's not running as much as you might think he is either. He's stolen bases, particularly given how much the stolen base landscape has changed. It's nothing to write home about.
Right. He has 14 steals on the season. Last year he had 32. So
yeah, with the 2 today, he got up to 14.
Yeah, I think part of it is he's hitting more fly balls this year. He has a career high 39% fly ball rate. It's led to his BABIP coming down. So he's not on base. His OBP is higher this year, but it's weird.
You know what it is? Home run derby ruined him. Got to get that narrative going.
No,
it's always somebody.
His expected confidence is in the toilet right now, Scott. That's what's going on.
His confidence was way up that day.
Yeah, that's true. Some bullpen updates here for the Orioles. Felix Bautista entered the 9th with a 2-run lead. He gave up 1 run and converted his 31st save. For the Pirates, David Bednar was unavailable. Colin Holderman got the 9th inning. He gave up a run, picked up his 2nd save. For the Guardians, Emmanuel Clase picked up his 31st. For the Tigers, Alex Lang is in flux right now, I guess you could say. Jason Foley is on the bereavement list. Bo Brisky pitched the final 2 innings for his 2nd save. The day before it was Jose Cisneros. So the Tigers bullpen is it's kind of messy right now. For the Cardinals, Jojo Romero got the 9th inning with a 5-run lead. He gave up 2 runs. For the Red Sox, Kenley Jansen struck out 2 for his 26th save. And I was watching the Dodgers. Evan Phillips was unavailable. So Brewstar Gratterall got the 9th, and he picked up his 5th save of the year. To stream or not to stream, we will start with Friday, which we pointed out yesterday, not the best days. I think we said Christopher Sanchez against the Twins and Johan Oviedo against the Reds. I can't do Reed Detmers at the Astros, Scott. I can't.
Nope. I don't really want to do those others either.
I think Sanchez is fine.
I mean, if I need to pick a third, honestly, I might prefer this guy to Oviedo, Paul Blackburn at Washington.
Yeah. I mean,
I guess the fact he pitches for the A's, you're almost certain he's not going to get a win, but yeah, I don't know. And that Cincinnati line is pretty scary. I know they haven't hit as well lately, but it's still pretty scary.
That's true. On Saturday, this might be the best streaming day of all season, Scott. We've got Gavin Williams, tougher matchup against Tampa Bay, but their lineup hasn't been great over the past month or so. Gavin Williams, I think, is solid. We've got
Cole Reagans, baby.
Cole Reagans against the Cardinals. We've got Steven Matz at the Royals. I think that's fine. And then I think even a little bit deeper, Brandon Williamson has pitched well recently. He's at the Pirates. I think it's okay.
Start, right?
What's
pitched
up?
well recently. It's really just one good start.
No, I think what I give out the other day, like his last 5 or 6 starts, I think he's been solid.
Listen, I just watched the Pirates lineup batter the Braves rotation for 4 days in a row. So
that's true.
I don't know. It's probably just Braves pitchers aren't that good, but I might prefer JP France against the Angels. I know it's a tougher matchup. I might prefer him to Brandon Williamson, though. That's just me.
Brandon Williamson, since the start of July, 7 games, a 3.19 ERA, a 1.04 WHIP, right around a strikeout per inning.
But to put things in perspective, those first 3 we mentioned, Gavin Williams, Cole Reagan, Steven Matz. I'm going to go on a limb here, having not seen Sunday yet. Those are the best 3 streamers of the weekend.
Well, Scott, you are correct. Let's talk about Sunday. This one's tough because Cutter Crawford had a good matchup against the Royals, did not pitch well. He's facing the Tigers on Sunday. I think it's all right. James Tyone also pitching well recently. He's at the Blue Jays. Their lineup has not been very good. I think
I'll take Silseth.
Silseth at the Astros.
Yeah.
Tough spot to pitch.
I'll still take him. Cutter Crawford second. And
say it, Scott. Say it.
And what? Say what?
Jameson Tyone, say it.
I don't know about that guy. I don't know. That's kind of RNG, if you know what I mean. Maybe it'll work out.
It's funny you said that because you have been saying the words random number generator a lot recently on the podcast. I was going to recommend, let's just say RNG and shorten it.
Well, that is a true acronym that people are familiar with.
Is that true? Yeah.
Oh. RNG. If you say RNG, people know what you mean, I think. Maybe not this group, but our live audience here. I've always wondered, who are the people who tune in live to a streamed fantasy baseball show at almost 2 a.m. And now we know.
Don't say it like that, Scott.
It's a bunch of interior decorators. Clearly,
it might be. Yeah.
This is. Yeah. And that's our niche audience.
My guess would also be a lot of people on the West Coast or, I don't know, in another
country. Bunch of interior decorators in California. That's what it is.
If you are watching us live, write in the comments right now and let us know, where are you watching us from? We want to figure out.
What is your occupation?
And what is your yearly income? No, I'm kidding. We're going to wrap there. For Scott, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we will be back next week. Bye-bye.